Download and open up your scales assignment that we did for this week. A little review. What is this area here called? Counter. Somebody said main counter. That's true. Either one of those is a good answer. What does this part of the main counter stand for right here? Correct. This and this? Ticks. Remember that? Like the little insect that bites you and gives you Lyme's disease, which you don't want to get. Ticks. What are the numbers that we had discussed being important with the ticks? Anybody remember those?
966 for B, I guess.
240. I think you have a couple, Elizabeth. It's 240 is what?
240, 440, no, 240,
720. 240, 480, and 720. Also 0, because that's the first part of every beat. So if we are just talking about 8th notes and 16th notes, right, so you didn't get this, but it's in some of those review videos. I'll go over very quickly. This part of the main counter here are the subdivisions of the beat. In music, we have 8th notes, 16th notes, 8th note triplets, 32nd notes. Those are all subdivisions of a beat. In every digital audio workstation, that would be Pro Tools, Cubase, Logic, Performer, Ableton, I don't know about Ableton, but most likely Ableton. This area here is called ticks, like the tick of a clock. And they all have a little bit different resolution. Pro Tools has 960 ticks in a quarter note. So that means you can break up a quarter note into 960 subdivisions. 480 is 1/2 of 960. That's an 8th note. So if this is 0, 0, 0, that would be the first 8th note of a beat. 480 would be the second 8th note of a beat. 240 would be the second 16th note of a beat. 0 would be the first 16th note. 240 would be the second 16th note. 480 would be the third 16th note and the second 8th note, since they both happen at the same spot. And 720 would be the fourth 16th note. Now, why is that important? Because the first thing that we're going to learn how to do in order to understand how to edit MIDI information is to snap things to the grid, to make our time metronomically perfect. Not the most musical thing, but it's good to learn how to do that from the beginning manually, and then eventually later, once you get that down, you can do that using different functions like quantize and stuff. But I teach quantizing a little later on. So remember this right here? The A and the Z is on. That means we have key focus, or keyboard focus. That means that we can use the T key to zoom in and the R key to zoom out. So I'm going to zoom in, and this page here is called the edit page. I substitute arrange page, arrange window, edit window, whatever comes out of my mouth. But I think the real term for this is the edit page in Pro Tools. And also, I'll talk about the cursor or the playback head are the same thing to me. In Pro Tools, when it originally started, this used to be called the playback head, and then a couple of versions ago they switched it to the cursor. And these used to be called regions, and now they're called clips. So the terminology changes. And also, this is called playback head in some DAWs, and the cursor in other areas and in other DAWs. So they're interchangeable terms for me. Now, we have our timeline set up. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me reset this up because this is set up for my bit here. We don't need to see time code. We don't need to see key. Okay. We're seeing bars and beats here. And you notice bar 1, beat 1, bar 1, beat 2, beat 3, beat 4. Now, if you notice here, there are lines. I'm going to make this bigger and zoom in a little. There are lines that go up and down here that correspond with eighth notes, right? We got 480, 480. That's your grid. Okay? These lines here. That's your grid. I'm going to change that resolution of that grid. You can have that grid be on, you can have the grid be off, and you could change the resolution of the grid. So, does anybody remember how we turn the grid on and off? We talked about it last week. Anybody venture a guess? Go ahead, Cliff.
Next to the transport where it says grid and nudge, the grid is illuminated in green.
Excellent. That's exactly right. Right here. Watch what happens when I turn this off. Our grid disappears. Okay? So always make sure in this class we're going to always be working in the grid. Next semester, not always. I want to teach you from that's like the basic foundations. You don't always have to grid everything. If you're recording a jazz quartet, you don't need a grid, right? Unless you want it to sound like smooth jazz or funk or something like that, and you play into a click track. So you turn the grid on, and over here, remember, everywhere in Pro Tools there is a downward-facing triangle or a sideways-facing arrow. There is a menu that pops out when you click on that. So we've got this set up for bars and beats. Our grid is set up for that. And we've got it selected for eighth note. I'm going to change the resolution to 16th notes. And you'll notice that there are twice as many grid lines now as there were before. There are 4 per beat. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, right? So we've made it 16th notes. So you can change the resolution of the grid. Now, when we look at this clip that I played here, we can see that each one of these lines here represents a note. Some of my notes are a little early, right? Notice how they come before the grid. If I go to the selector tool and hover, right, that click the grid right there, see how that note starts a little early? That note starts a little early, that note starts a little early. I'm a little early on all these notes, except now I'm a little late. In reality, this is very close to being fine. But I'm going to teach you how to make things perfect, and then we can play around with it from there. So in order to change those notes manually, which is what we're first going to do, we need to get to what's called a Midi editor. In Pro Tools, there are 3 ways to see Midi information. I'm going to give you the first 2 that we're not going to use in this class for various reasons, and I'll give you the third one last that we will use in class. The first one is, now you guys should follow along if you've got your session open. Take your mouse and see right here where it says clips. Notice here there's a downward facing triangle. This is the track view selector. So based on what you select here, what you will see in this area will change. So if you just click on this, you get all of these different options here that you can view in this window, in this clip. We will get to what most of these are, but for right now, see where it says notes right below clip? Click on that, and you'll see that the view of this changes. And those are our MIDI notes. Okay. Go back to clip view. The reason I don't like using this when we're working is I like to use the edit window as a big arrangement page where I can copy and paste clips and duplicate clips and not worry about notes. Once in a while, if I'm in a rush, I might open this up and work here, but I like to keep just clips on here because eventually when you have audio files and MIDI files, it looks bad to have all different views in this one page. It's nice to keep it nice and consistent. It looks good. Makes it more organized. Okay, the second way to see MIDI information is if you go to the window menu right here, click on that, and see where it says MIDI editor? You click on that, and you've got a new window pops up. This is great to work in. I work in this window if I'm home and I've got 2 monitors. I can have this window on a second monitor open all the time. Very easy. I can have it big. I can zoom in. I can do all sorts of stuff on that. We only have 1 monitor here, so I don't recommend using this for that one reason alone. But I like working in the separate MIDI editor page on a second monitor. The third way, and the way that we're going to do this in class, and what I'm also going to do is I'm going to reduce the size of this. So the way that you do that is if you hover along the bottom border, you'll notice that the shape of the cursor changes to a cross, and you can just click and drag that up. On the bottom, I'm lifting this up so people in the back can see. Right here, you'll notice that there is a line with an upward facing arrow. Click on that. And you've got the MIDI editor that I'd like you to work on. Now, before we do anything, let's talk about navigating around the MIDI editor. Notice that I've got an area selected here in the arrange or the edit window, and it's also selected here. To unselect that, you would click right here in the timeline. Let me raise this up a little bit so that people can see that in the back of the room. You would just click right in the timeline here, in the ruler. So now, if you hover along the top border right here, notice that the arrow, the cursor changes to a cross. You can click and drag that up. And notice it gets bigger. Let me do that again. Right here on the top border of the MIDI editor, if you hover on that black line, the shape of the cursor changes to a cross. You can click and just drag it right up, and it will change the sign. It will change the size. I do speak English. Alternatively, if you hover along the bottom black border, you can make it smaller and drag that down. So you can resize that. Now, this area down here, we're not going to bother with today. We'll probably start bothering with it next week. But today we're not going to bother with it. We're going to close that. And the way that you do that is over here, right here, there's a downward facing triangle. Right here. Click on that. And that goes away. So I'm just going to walk around and see where everybody is right now. I know that for some of you this might be very easy, but I'm starting with the basics from everybody. Great. All looks good? Use your R and T key. Oh, you close this. You're in the MIDI, you're in the separate window. Close that. Yeah, and then click on this. See that upward face? Yeah, there you go. Good. Okay, yeah, so close off the velocity right here by clicking on that little arrow there. Excellent. Good, looks good. Looks good. Good. Everybody's looking good. Excellent. Departing wisdom or stupidity, depending upon your viewpoint. Okay. Now, another thing to notice. Right here, your key focus on the edit window is no longer active, but it's active here. So that means you can use your R key and your T key to zoom in and out. Whoops. And right here, this bar at the bottom here, you can grab that and scroll left and right. That is something I didn't put on one of the videos that I made. And I'm sorry I didn't. I'm going to put it on the next video I make. You can use the wheel on the mouse. If your cursor's in the edit window, you can scroll left and right with the wheel on the mouse. And that's typically how I do it. I don't put the mouse down here and drag this left and right. It's just, boom, this is very easy. Okay, so.
How did you do that? Sorry, I missed.
Okay, so I'm hovering I'm hovering with my mouse anywhere in here, and I can use the wheel or the ball on the mouse to go left and right. And I can also use it to go up and down. Now, okay, so here I've got everything in the window now. You'll notice that this is something that you all should get this concept together. What's this area called up here? Does anybody remember? Along the top here. That is the blank blank. The toolbar. Right? This is the toolbar. You'll notice that the MIDI editor has its own toolbar. Note well, don't get confused. These edit tools up here do not work here. These edit tools work here, right? The edit tools in the edit page or the arrange window, these up here, do not work in the MIDI editor. I know that's a little confusing and it's a mouthful to say, but remember that these tools work down here. Now look, the way you could tell where you're focused in is that right here along the perimeter of the toolbar, see how there's like an amber outline? That means that this is active. If I'm here, notice that it's amber here. Okay, so when you've got your MIDI editor open, you can tell which one is active, which part of this window is active, right? Which section of this window is active by which one has that amber border on it. Okay? Now, over here, right below your A and Z, way over here, there's a box with two lines in it. If you click on the bottom of that box, or the top of that box, it will change the width of the note. Watch what I mean. So I'm going to click on the bottom of this box and see how the notes get smaller? Like that, up and down, they get thinner. If I click on the top of that box, keep on clicking, they get bigger. So that's another way to reshape what you're seeing.
Is there a hotkey for that, or do we have to? Yeah.
There might be. I'll have to look that up. Who asked that question? What's your name?
David.
David. Email me that question so I don't forget. Yes, Kevin.
Can you just click the R and T key to zoom in and out?
Yeah, left and right over the size of the timeline. The R and T key, see it zooms in and out this way, but it doesn't actually really change the height of the notes. Now, key command, a new key command. Option Control A puts everything right in the window there. Right, so I'm going to close out the MIDI editor for a second, and I'm going to zoom way in, and I'm going to do Option Control A and see how it gets everything so that you can see it. Option Control A. So I could be zoomed way in. Option Control A, boom. So that's a good key command to know. Everybody understands the scrolling? Using the scroll wheel on the mouse. So left, if now look, if I'm here, see if the cursor's up in the edit page, I'm scrolling here, and you can scroll up and down in the tracks, and then once I'm here, it works. So it just matters where you're placing the mouse. This is your piano roll keyboard. These numbers on the different C's, we went over this. No, I didn't go over this with you guys. I went over in one of the videos. That is the MIDI number for that note. So this 2 right here on that C, right here, that would be C2. So if somebody said to you, I want to play C2, it would be this pitch. Now, right, this is C3. Every note between C2 and C3 is 2. So this note here is D2, E2, F2, G2, A2, B2, C3, and this note would be D3. Yes, Kevin?
Oh, that's what I'm sure.
Okay. We'll go over that a little bit more in the future. Now, over here, this is called there are these white borders all around the sides of Pro Tools. Those are various lists. In Logic and other DAWs, they may be called bins. These lists contain a list of all the information in Pro Tools. If you have audio files, audio clips, MIDI clips, tracks. So this is your tracks list. Now, only thing I'm going to teach you about this in steps. Right now, you'll notice that this is highlighted here. To unhighlight that, you would simply Option click on this dark line here. Boom. Right? Option click. And you notice that we're not highlighted here either. You can Option click on that name also, and it unhighlights that. All right. Everybody with me so far? Navigation. Learning, one of the biggest things to sequencing is learning how to navigate around the software. If I was going to learn a new piece of software, music software, I'd learn how to navigate. I'd spend a month just learning how to navigate around, where things are, where things are located, what works in each window. It's very important. Okay. So we have our scales here, and I'm going to show you we got 4 measures of music. So for each measure, we're going to do a different way of snapping these notes to the grid. So these all should be in quarter notes, I hope. If you did eighth notes, you snap it to the eighth note. But what we want to do is make sure that the beginning of each note is right on the quarter note. So let's zoom in a little bit with our T, make sure that we're in the right window. Zoom in with our T key. Let's go from left, let's start with the trim tool. So click on the trim tool. I'm going to zoom way in so you could see what I'm doing here. I'm going to take the trim tool and notice the direction of the trimmer. It's facing left now. It's going to switch directions. See that? Now it's facing right. So I'm going to go a little bit past the start of the note, but and just click. And it snaps it right to that grid. I'll do the next one. Right? Notice the shape will change, and once the shape changes, you can click on that and we'll snap it to the grid. Okay, now, I missed this one here. I also want to quantize the durations of the notes. So I'm going to click, and it will snap it out so that it's exactly 1 beat long. Just before, right at the end of the note, and just before the next beat. And then notice how this note is highlighted. If you don't want to have any notes highlighted, click in the ruler here. I'm going to get my R key and zoom in, and we could see that these are all perfect quarter notes. Again, not our end goal, just we're getting a nice foundation and a reference as to how to operate these tools. Now, for the next measure, let's go to the grabber tool right here. Is everybody done with their first measure? Right? This is not very difficult. Go to our first measure, grab our grabber tool, and right here, I'm just going to click on this, keep it clicked, and just drag it, and it'll snap right to that grid. This is a second way. Right? And see how they're all snapped right to the grid? Now, with the duration, you do have to use the trimmer tool again. And see this, I have to drag this all the way over. So click and drag. All right, so that's 2 ways that we are changing the start time and the duration of the note. Now, next thing I want to try. Okay. Now, I'm not consistent here, so let me just, all right, so this next measure, I'm going to use the trimmer again. And just really, you can see how quickly I can do this, right? It's because I've been doing this for years. It's pretty easy. All right, now, on my last measure here, I'm consistently ahead of the beat with this, and this. I'm going to use the grabber, and I'm going to click up here. See where the mouse is, way up here? Click and drag and select all these notes. And then I've let go of the mouse, right? I'm just going to click and drag. And they don't all snap to grid, but they get closer. And then I can do this again. Right? So if you want, let's say that you just want, you played something and you like the way it feels, but it's just a little bit ahead of the beat, right? You could just take this and drag it like this, and you could maintain the relationships of all the notes and get it closer to being a little like more in the pocket. Now, there's one other way that you can get things to snap to the grid. If you take your selector tool, and you notice how this note here goes a little bit too long, and this note here starts a little early. So if I click here so that I'm intersecting the end of this note and the beginning of this note, I can use the key command, Command E, and then click up here in the ruler. And you notice that it's separated out those notes at the grid, and then I could simply use the grabber tool, select and delete, select and delete. All right, so that's it. Those are all the different ways that you can snap to grid that you need to know about. Now, obviously, there are other things that we can do in this page. Let me just play this. Whoops. So to get to the beginning, what key do you hit? What key do you hit on the keyboard? To go to the beginning of the piece. Return, or yeah, enter, probably. Let me just, no, enter's not good, right? It's return. You know, it's interesting. This is sometimes the enter key and sometimes the return key, right? Depending on if you have a laptop or an extended keyboard. On the extended keyboard, the enter key over here opens up a marker, memory location, and we'll get into those later on. I went over this last week. I'm going to go over it again. These numbers over here do different things than these numbers here. All right? Just remember that. Now, this gets really slow, clicking and then coming down here and then clicking and coming down here. There are keys that let us navigate to the different tools. Remember in the first class, we went to our Apple keyboard, or Apple menu, we went to System Preferences, we went to Keyboard, and we set this up so that we can use the F1, F2 keys as standard function keys. That's going to help us out right now. Watch what happens here. Whoops. Oh, whoops, I'm hitting the wrong keys. I apologize. Old man eyes. See that? How I'm doing that? I'm not using the mouse. I'm hitting F7. F6 takes us to the trimmer tool. F7 takes us to the selector. F8 takes us to the grabber. And F10 takes us to the pencil tool. We don't have to worry about scrub at F9. So it becomes that you can have your left hand navigating these guys and your right hand navigating these guys. Makes things really fast. There's another, so that's if you're on an extended keyboard like this. If you guys are working home on laptops and you don't have those, there's another way. If you hold down, I think it's the command, right? So command 2, 3, 4, and 6. So I'm holding the command key down. You see that? I'm hitting 2. It takes me to the trimmer. 3, 4, and 7. Or 6. Thank you. So what I'll do is I'll just have my thumb on the command key and then just use my index finger to scroll between those different edit modes. All right? Learning how to navigate like this speeds up your workflow. All right, now, before we, also this tracks list, you can resize that. I'm hovering over the right border. Notice it changes to a cross. I can click and make that smaller. I can hide it by clicking down here, but I like to leave that open. Now, I want to show you guys things, if you're not a good pianist, things that will help you in your creativity as part of this class. Now, we've got all these notes in here. What if I wanted to change this melody without playing something new in? Hold on, Kevin, you know everything. Except when you're asking questions about how to make PDFs. Okay, let's say I want to go from C, F, E, right? I could click and just drag straight up. Click, drag straight up. Right, so now I've got, and let me just change this also. I don't like this clicking during play. So if you click on the metronome up here, double click, you get this little menu, and I like to only click during record. I don't like hearing that click all the time, especially with earbuds on, hurts your ears. Right, so I just changed and wrote a new melody. What if you want to change the rhythm? Very easy. Take your selector tool, hover, hit that Command E, right? Then I clicked up here and I went to the grabber tool. And then I'll go back to here. Let's make this a 16th note, right? I've got this set for 16th notes. Command E. Get this guy. Right? So I've changed. So if you can't play keyboards really well, you can do stuff like this to help you create parts and melodies. Knowing how to edit like this. What if you want to add harmony or a second line? Very easy. Hold down your Option key. So I'm gonna add an A to this first note. So I'm going to take this. I'm holding down the Option key before I click on it, and I'm dragging up to A. And notice now I've got 2 notes. If I want to make this a quarter note, I simply go to my trim tool and drag it out. And then, once I have this here, I can Option drag this here, and maybe I'll make this a G. So we got a suspended note there. And let's say I want to, and if I want to make that longer, right? So you could play around like this and add additional notes very easily. You want me to go over that again? Or do you think you understand that? So if I didn't like anything I did, multiple levels of undo. Command Z. Just keep doing it till you get back to the beginning. Multiple levels of undo. Yes, Kevin.
What was the command that you did where you took the note and you just copied like the length of it and you just moved it to another note? Sorry, when you did with the C, you moved it to an A, but then you didn't like, you did a command where you just copied the length of that MIDI note and you just dragged it up. Like you made a copy.
So what I did was I held down the Option key, and I'll make sure I have my grabber selected. Click and drag. Is that what you mean?
So the option,
Option drag. That's like in every DAW. A lot of DAWs use like the copy, paste, cut, Option drag. These are like standard Mac keyboard commands that do all the same thing on almost every Mac program. One other thing to notice.
What did you do for the metronome to?
Oh yes, so the metronome is enabled when it's blue.
Yeah.
Double click on that. Come on, and a new menu
double.
comes up.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
Sure. Now, I can also do phrasing using the trimmer tool. What do I mean by that? Right? Just done some phrasing. Just by changing the duration of the note. And that's going to be helpful in the Bartok violin duet that we're going to be sequencing over the next couple of weeks.
How did you turn them into, split the quarter note into 2 eighths notes?
So she wanted to know how I split the note into two separate parts. Elizabeth asked about eighth notes, but it could be any duration that you have set in the click. So you could have a 16th note and a dotted eighth note, or a dotted eighth note and a 16th note, or 2 eighth notes. So you have to go to the selector tool. You hover over the note that you want to cut, right? And you pick your subdivision, and then you just simply hit Command E. Well, you got to make sure that you click on it, right? Not hover. I'm sorry. So you got the blinking line here. Command E, and then click up here in the ruler so that they're not both highlighted. Right, and then you could do something like this. even, you know. See. Right, so you're already adding phrasing and things are starting to sound a little bit more musical even though we're chopping things to the grid. Now, I want to make sure, so what we've gone over here is, and this is, the phrasing thing isn't on any of the videos I've made yet. That'll be on a video I make either this week if I get the chance to do it. But I'm going to upload this video that I'm making right now during class, so you'll be able to review this stuff into our Dropbox. So we've gone over different ways to make sure that a note starts on a grid, on the grid, on a spot in the grid. We've gone over how to change the length of a note so that it is gridded also. We've gone over splitting notes into two. We've gone over dragging notes using the grabber tool. We've gone over changing phrasing and rhythms. Now, you can also change the starting point of a note. So I'm going to take my trimmer tool and go back to 720 there, and I'm going to take my grabber tool and move that note so it starts there, right? So you can move the beginnings of notes wherever you want to change the rhythm. All done right in the MIDI editor. And the reason why I want to do this with the grid on is so that you have musical values that you can hear. If you just have it with no grid and you're moving things around randomly, you've got no reference point as to what the time is. You can get stuff to sound good that way, but you need a lot of experience doing this before you can get to that point. So that's why I recommend, at first, learning how to walk by using the grid. Okay. Now, we've got about 45 minutes left. Okay, that's good for this right now. Yada, 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 yada. Let's see. All right. Let me, I'm going to erase that for now. You guys have these all up on Dropbox, right? So you just have a copy in your computer now, right? So that what your homework is all up on Dropbox, and what we're working on right now is something you downloaded from Dropbox. Because I want you to erase this clip right here by just highlighting it and hitting delete. We're doing a new version of this, right? So we're going to learn a new trick. We're going to go to the File menu, and we're going to save this as, not save, but save as. And whatever you've got, just write. So in other words, if I have, it should be something like this. Whatever the date was that you started out with my initials or your initials. I'm going to do test, and I'm going to put the cursor right there and just write V2 for version 2. So this is the second version, and then I'll save that. And then your original piece will be intact, and we'll have a new version. All right? So what I want to do now is let's work on playing another scale, and then we'll add another scale on a second track, playing along with the first one. All right, so let me show you what I mean. Okay, great. I'm going to save that. I'm going to just use the key command, Command Shift N, like Nancy. One stereo instrument track, create. All right, so why don't you guys just go play another C major scale like this so you have, we have a similar reference point. Oh, one other thing I wanted to show you in the MIDI editor. If you set your grid for quarter notes, you can use the pencil tool and draw whoops, and draw in. And those are all quarter notes. So if you can't play keyboards, right, these are alternative ways. Sorry, I forgot about this. Right, so you can draw in, and that they'll all be quantized perfectly. So that's the pencil tool. And if I make the grid 16th notes, right, you'll see that it will draw in 16th notes. So whatever duration the grid is will be what kinds of notes that you can draw in with the pencil. So, you know, you can make some really crazy you could just throw some crazy stuff in, very simply. Okay. Let me just undo some of these things. All right. I'm going to close this window out. We don't need the editor for the time being. And we're going to go to this first insert column, click. We're going to go to a multi-channel plugin. We're going to go to Instrument, and we're going to go to Scroll to the bottom. And we're going to use Expand To. This is the instrument that I want you to use. This is Pro Tools free. It's a rompler, it's called. A rompler is an instrument that has a bunch of samples in ROM. Right, so there's all sampled instruments and waveforms in here. It's like a B instrument. In other words, it's not an A or an A+, it's a B. It's good. It's good for teaching. But don't and I do use this for some sounds for film scores. There are some sounds in here that I love. But don't expect to, this is great for teaching. Let's just leave it at that. So let me just give you a quick lesson on this. This whole thing right here is called a GUI. Who knows what that means? Graphic user interface. It's basically the window that you see with all the controls in it. All right? Now, over the course of the semester, I'm going to get into more and more of these controls, but I don't want to confuse you right now with lots. You've already gotten an insane amount of information today, right? So the basic thing is that this is actually, you could do some amazing programming with this, synth programming with this, even with the limited amount of controls it has. But the only thing that we need to concern ourselves with today is right over here where it says preset. You have a question?
No, that's it creates an audio track of how to be.
Oh yes, so cancel. Right, so you've got lots of tracks here. Okay, so right click on this, set up right click. Whoops, what happened? Mouse. Something there, but- So if you right click on this, delete, and so you need a stereo instrument track. Command Shift N, Command Shift N. Gotta do Command Shift N, stereo instrument track. Great.
What preset are we using?
Yeah, so I'm going to get to that. I'm going to let you guys choose. So the thing that we need to just look at for ourselves, and this can be very daunting at first, all right? Over here in the preset column, it says factory default. This is the librarian menu. Click on this, and you will get a bunch of folders, 30 of them. And each one of these folders has tons and tons of instrument choices. Yeah. So we're going to make this very simple. Okay, we'll all do the same sound. Actually, now that I think about it. Let's go to mallets, and let's go to 09 right here. Marimba. All right, you see this about halfway down? So we're going to go to mallets. I can let go of the mouse. It'll stay open. Then scroll down to 09 marimba. And just click. And notice that marimba. Now, depending upon the sound, each one of these sections here may have different instruments in it. They make up the conglomerate sound. These are different slots that you can load instruments into sound simultaneously. Now, let's name our track marimba. And if I'll record enable that, notice in MIDI, the second I record enable a track, the previous one is no longer record enabled. You can record 2 MIDI tracks simultaneously, but we'll worry about that another day. All right, so we've got a nice marimba sound, not bad. And then to close this, you would just click up here. You don't need to see that right now. I'm going to hit the return key. I'm going to go back to 0. And I'm going to do eighth notes going down. You guys can do whatever you want, but let me just do this once. So you see, this is like a big part of this work, is learning how to play off yourself, right? Learning how to play against another instrument. So the way that we're going to work is layering instruments one at a time on top of each other to build up a track. That's the eventual goal. There are a lot of other things that we're going to do before we get there, but what we're going to work right now on playing in a second line. So I'll hit. Now there's 2 ways to get this record enabled. If this is the kind of keyboard you have, you push the 3 right here. If you're working on your laptop, you can push Command Spacebar. I always think 6. No, 6 is play. Huh, interesting. I don't know just the single note, the single number key commands, but that's all right. But anyway, return Command Spacebar or the number 3. So as long as we have wait for note MIDI right here enabled, that's this button here, wait for note, nothing will happen until the computer receives, or Pro Tools receives, a MIDI command. That could be playing a note, that could be turning a knob or pushing a slider or hitting a pad on your keyboard or hitting the sustain pedal. Anything that transmits MIDI will make this thing start to record. We want it, for our purposes, to just be the keyboard. So I know I want to play eighth notes. So I'm going to hear those eighth notes in my head. Dot, 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 3 and 4 and. It's that simple, and then you can either try to play that better, or you can use your MIDI editor to make them sound tighter. So you guys try something with your earbuds on to add a second track. Keep it simple. You could even do something like this. You can even do something simple like that. Just get used to playing against yourself. And remember, hit the return key to get back to the top. You could even play a scale an octave lower in unison, like in octaves, whatever you want. Oh, thank you, David. Up here. Put that dot on this track here. All right, and then you have to scroll. All right, you all look like you have it. You all look pretty good. All right? Good. All looks pretty good. You look complex, Cliff. Yes, okay. I'll show everybody that because you're the second person to ask that. Okay, let me play something in really quickly. Okay, so that's stupid, but now let's go to our MIDI editor. So I'm going to click here. Now, I did go over this a little bit. In our MIDI editor, we are seeing this track still. We're not seeing, right? We're seeing this track. If you click here, you should see the information change, and you'll notice right here, this little dot, that shows you which track is active in the editor. So if I click over here, notice that the second track from the top is active in the MIDI editor. If I want to do it manually, I just would simply click here, but then notice you'll see both tracks. And this is actually something that when you get really good at MIDI editing, you can edit 3 or 4. I've had 40 tracks open in the MIDI editor and editing them together. And you ask how I can keep track of everything, right? Color coding. We're going to get into that right now. Notice that both of these tracks are the same color, the clips, and down here it's reflected. There are also different shades of the color, like this is darker than this. We'll get into that next week. There's a reason for that. Over here in this border, well, first of all, we'll go to our setup. Remember when we did this little setup where the default track color coding is tracks and MIDI channels? Yeah, let me do this again for the people that were absent last week. Go to Setup, then go to Preferences. Make sure you're in the first panel. We like to have our tooltips, function, and details turned on. We like to organize our plugin menus by category and manufacturer. All this stuff will become apparent why I'm doing this as the semester goes on. Color coding right here. Always display marker colors. MIDI note color shows velocity. Make sure those are on. Then here under default track color coding, I teach that the tracks and MIDI channels should be selected here, and that the default clip color coding is track color. Tracks and MIDI channels, track color. MIDI note color shows velocity. The darker the note color, the higher the velocity. That's really good when you're editing velocity, which we will do next week. Okay, so, and then one other thing is if you go to MIDI, click in Basics, click to automatically create click track in new sessions. Enable that. So that whenever you open Pro Tools going forward, you should get a click track. And if it doesn't work, you just manually add it in. Okay, great. So over here in this border here, if you double click on that, that's the track color code, right? So notice how if you hover, you get what the name of the bit is. That's why I set those tooltips up. It helps me even. Double click on that, and you get a nice palette. All right? The color that's outlined is the color of the track and the clip. So if I click here, that should change. See that? Or I could just make a big difference. Now, if you're still not seeing a change here, right, you're getting something like that, click on these boxes until you get it the way it's supposed to be. These two boxes over here. And then this one, let me make that a nicer color. There we go. And I could see both tracks in the MIDI editor. This is a little bit more advanced. I'm just showing you this. You don't have to work like this. Now, the other thing on the track color coding is I like to have it look pastelish. So what I'll do is, you see this little rainbow here or color swatch? Click on that to turn it on. And notice how this area here is now all in color. And you can play around with the saturation and the brightness, and you can get it to look really nice. And for me, to have something pleasant to look at makes me want to look at it longer. If something's ugly to look at, I have a hard time focusing. Beauty's in the eye of the beholder, which is why you set this up for your own aesthetics. So if you like your things to be really garish, you know, that's great, no problem. I like them to be like a little bit more pastelish, myself personally. Okay, so to only see one of these tracks, you would simply go here and click that button and it will disappear. And again, this is highlighted. I'm going to option click on that and it'll stop being highlighted. So now I can work on this one. If I want to work on the other one, I have to do a two-step operation here. So you enable the one that you want to see and you disable the other one. Or you can just go back and forth by clicking on the clip. Okay. Everybody with me so far today? A lot of information. I pack a lot of information into these classes, which is why I make additional materials for you to review. That's why I do the screen capture and I pop up these other videos. Let's close this by doing Command W. I'm sorry, Command Shift W. I'm going to save that. But we're not quitting Pro Tools. We're just leaving Pro Tools open. We're just closing out of the session we were just in. So that's Command Shift W. Now, I handed out some music today. The PDFs are in here if you lose it. Okay? Class materials. I'm going to talk about the homework. This is going to be it's going to be like about a 3 or 4 week project. 3-week project, probably. Sorry, I just turned the light on. Undergraduates, you pick one of these 2 pieces of music. They're very simple. I would prefer that you pick the one that goes in contrary motion, which is number 17. If that's too much for you, you could do the other one. Graduate students, you're going to be doing the Bartók violin duet. And this is what I'm going to want you to do. I handed out all the violin duets? I don't have an extra one? Bummer. Okay, let me open these up here in a PDF. So, right, okay, so let's say that you were going to do number 17, right? Let me shut this window again. What do we notice? First thing we notice is that we're in 3/4 time, which is different. And we notice that a quarter note equals 94. So I'm going to just watch, and then we'll work together. So I'm going to do a new session, and I'm going to call this Bartók number 17. You can't use the number sign in Pro Tools, just Bartók 17. Today is today's the 4th. Yep. With my initials. And I'm going to save that to my desktop. Okay, before I start doing anything, I want to set up 3/4 time. Very simple. We're back at the beginning at measure 1. Click on the meter ruler right here at this plus sign, and boom, a meter change shows up. Put in 3, hit enter, and I'm at 3/4. Very simple. You can do that anywhere. If I want to go to a measure of 4/4 at measure 5, I would simply hit 5 like that, or put the playback head or the cursor on bar 5, just like that. Hit the tempo, the meter thing, and type in 4/4. Right? You could do this with any kind of subdivision you want. So let's say I want to go to measure 7 and make that a measure of 11/8. 11/8. Okay. See how easy that is? It's really easy. But this song's in 3/4. Graduate students, you're going to have to do some time signature changes, because the Bartók has several time signature changes. But this is pretty simple. Now, I'm going to hit return to get back to 0. Now the next thing about this piece, let's get this so we can see both things here, is that a quarter note equals 96. So I'm back at the beginning. I'm going to click on this plus sign, tempo change, snap to bar. Just type in 96, and there's my tempo. Now, I'm going to hit 3, and we're going to listen to this. Oops. I can't record enable this. All right. What happens if 96 is too fast for you to play?
You can lower it.
Right, but I like to do it this way. You could change the tempo here, or you could set up a preset. So what I'll do is I'll turn off the conductor track, and I'll type in 60, right? So notice here in the ruler, we're at manual tempo. I can play this in at 60, turn on the conductor, and it'll play back at 96. I've been a professional pianist at some of the highest levels in New York City, and I still do this. Okay? Not cheating. I know I could tell you some named guitarists, some of the best jazz guitarists in the world, studio session players, that record solos in Pro Tools 20 beats a minute slower and then speed it up. I won't name names, Mr. 330, Mr. 335. But my friend Ken has engineered sessions like that for, anyway, whatever. So it's not cheating. You're painting a picture of sound, right? You use whatever tools you can. So you got that? You have a preset tempo change. You can make that whatever tempo you want. If that's too fast, you can make it 50, whatever. And then you turn it back on to hear the playback. Very simple. All right, so we know we're having 2 instruments. So I'm going to go Command-Shift-N, and I'm going to type in 2 stereo instrument tracks and create. And then I'm going to put in expand 2 in the top one. Now watch this little trick. I have expand 2 in the top one. Option, click, drag. Boom. It's in the second one. Option, click, drag. Option, click, drag is a great way to time saver. Let me do that again. No insert. Got rid of it. Hold down the Option key, click, and drag. My biggest thing is saving time, doing the setup stuff so that when I'm creating, I have more time for that. And I like to set up first before I do creative work. Because this way I'm in the flow when I'm creating. That'll become apparent as we go forward. Okay, so
There is any way to duplicate a click track?
a click track?
A track?
Yes, there is. We'll get to that.
Okay.
Yes. There's all sorts of ways to do all sorts of stuff. We'll get to that definitely. All right, so let's see. For my first one, I'm going to audition. Let's try, let's see what this sounds like. Great. I'm going to leave that, and that's called hard cut. So you can use whatever sounds you want. Be adventurous. And then in the second one, which will be my left hand, I'm going to want to do something maybe a polysynth. Let's do, oh, what does this sound like? Oh, cool, multi-harp. I'll do that. That's a little bit too much. It goes on for too long. Great, warm whoa. That's like a cheesy sound. It's like 1970s disco. Cheesy. Okay. What I'm going to do is get this information into there whatever way I can. Okay? So I'm going to show you a few different ways that I would work with this. So let me make this so that we could see both windows. So I'm going to add the left, we're doing, let's see, number 17. I'm going to do the left hand first, and I'll use the bottom one for that. So I can play it at that tempo, no problem. Right? Okay, I did that. And I'm going to change the color as I'm working so I could see the two different tracks. And now I'll go up here, and I'll hit return. And I'm going to play the right hand. Yes, F and F sharp. F sharp and G. Yes, that was not a mistake. Okay, Bartok, he's doing symmetrical things with the hands. He's not worried so much about what the notes are. F sharp and G, right? G and F. So this is a little wanky sounding over here. Okay, now I am going to let's do that other little trick. Let me turn off the conductor track. I want to start at measure 5. How do I do that? I put the playback head right at measure 5. And I'm going to do the right hand. So I'm going to do these 4 bars. Whoops. Let me resize this. It's good to have the sheet music printed out for this unless you have 2 screens. Okay, so I'm going to do that. So I've slowed it down, right? 2 and 3 and. And then right, so that's the slow version, and then you just can turn the conductor track and hear that. Okay, let's say it's getting a little tricky for you, right? Right? If you notice, bar 1 I'm teaching alternative ways to get this information into the computer if you're not a keyboard player. I want you to just get the information in the computer and then edit it, and then we'll use it to create arrangements with different orchestrations. That's going to be the end goal. So I'm not assuming that everybody in here can play piano. What do you notice about bar 1 through 4 and bars 4 through 9? 5 through 9. Look at the notes. What is it? It's the same thing, starting on different pitch. Descending, descending, ascending, the same exact rhythm, right? The same exact rhythm. Okay, so what can you do? Make sure that when you click on this, see this here? This tells you the start and end point of the selection. Make sure it's exactly 4 measures long, not longer or less. Command D will duplicate that. Or Option R to repeat it, right? So Option R, you repeat it 1 time. Or Option Shift Drag, our big friend. Boom. And then you could just go back and edit those pitches and make them correct. You don't have to play it in. So I'll do all 3 of those again. I've highlighted this. I've made sure, or you could take the selector tool and make sure, because sometimes you might have gone a little farther. You want to make sure that you start at bar 5, click and drag, and make sure that that's all selected and it's only 4 measures long. Command D to duplicate. Option R to repeat it once. Using the grabber, Option Shift Drag. And then simply, whoops, use the grabber tool, hang out in here, and then you want to make sure G, A, B. So, oh no, it's G, F sharp, E. So you're on C here. So look at this. Command, I'm going to grab these three, and I'm going to click, and I'm going to drag it up to G. And I have the same intervals. See that? That's really quick. If you use your brains, you can get this stuff in really quickly. And then I can select the, or you can just do it individually. D, the next note is C sharp. Then the next note is D, E, F sharp. And notice how I've also, as I've been dragging them, I've been getting them right on the grid at the same time. And then I just have to snap the ends to make them the right length. I'm going to do everything again. All right? Okay, I've got my sound set up. And I'm going to play the first 4 bars in the right hand. Whoops. So I'm going to hit the 3 key on the numeric pad, numeric keypad. And then I'm going to go down here. I'm going to make sure I'm back at measure 1. And I'm going to play the left hand. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Off. Okay. That's all played in. Now, remember, if you can't play keyboard well, go to your slow speed. I'm going to start at measure 5. I put the playback head at measure 5. Or I can simply type in 5 here. And I'm going to play the left hand here. And 3, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 1, and 2, 3, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 1, and 2, and 3, and... Okay? Now, yes?
Did you just like copy the first part and just transpose it all?
Correct, or drag the notes up. I'm showing the different ways to work. That's all I'm doing right now. Okay, right? So look, I can either Command D, right? I'm going to undo that with Z, or I can just Option drag. And then you can double click on that and it should open up in the editor now. And then I need to see the sheet music to see where I have to move those notes to. So I have to move this up. So if you're smart, you'll notice that all the intervals are the same between these notes. So once these are all selected, I can just simply drag everything up. Right? So these are ways that you get the information into the keyboard. And then when we do arrangements, we're going to have multiple instruments over, and we're going to do combinations of sounds. We're not going to use these sounds in the end. I just have them open just to get the music into the computer. So, undergraduates, for next week, get this whole thing sequenced and get it gridded.
What if you don't know how to read music?
At all?
I mean, I could listen to it and play it. If you could record, like, put up a audio file.
Okay. That's a tough one. If I write the, if what's your name again?
Rishab.
Rishab. if I send you a PDF with the letter names of those notes, you'll be able to play it in?
Yeah.
Do you know what the rhythms are?
Yeah.
Okay, so just send me an email to remind me to do that, because I'll forget. Okay, great. Now, let's take a look at the graduate students at the violin duet. Okay. So you can just title it Bartok Violin Duet. You don't have to write Sultan Lead, Soldier, you don't have to write any of this crap. Just Bartok Violin Duet on the title of your project. How many voices are in this piece? 4. Right? So 4 tracks, 1 for each voice. That means some tracks will only have a few notes in them. Like this, the bass track will only have these 3 notes here and these 3 notes here. And this last note. Before you do anything, though, you'll set up your time, which would be 80 beats per minute. I'm going to just erase these. And I'm going to get rid of that. And I'll make sure I'm back at the beginning, 80 beats per minute. Before you do anything, make your framework. What do I mean by that? What happens at measure 6? Time change. So make sure you're in 3/4 at bar 1. Okay, measure 6. Time change, 2/4. Whoop. And then measure 7, 3/4. Before you record anything, even before you put any instruments into the session. So that's 7, 8, 9, measure 10. And if I were you, I would put numbers on each one of these measures so you don't mess up with a pencil, you know? So 7, 8, 9, 10 is 2/4. Eleven is 3/4. This is why I picked this piece. You can learn a lot of juicy things with one piece. Oh, I made a mistake. See? 11 is 3/4. Whoop, no tempo. 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 is 2/4. Nineteen is 3/4. 20, 21, 22 is 2/4. Right? The undergraduates, that you should pay attention to this because this is, good stuff to learn. Okay, 22 is 2/4. 23 is 3/4, right to the end. Save. Save often. Save often. Command S is your friend. So if it crashes, you haven't lost too much work. And then once you've done that, you put in the soprano line. You can go 2 measures at a time. You don't have to do a whole performance. You could do 1 measure at a time. I don't care. You basically, whatever you need to do to get that information in there. All right? So you could play, if I wanted to play the soprano line, right? This is perfectly okay. Too fast, I can't do that. Sorry, teacher. It's too fast, I can't do it. Go to my preset. Right? Turn the conductor track off. Da, da, da. So, stop. Go to measure 2. Go to measure 3. You see what I mean? You don't have to do a complete performance. You can go measure by measure because we're going to edit this together to make it phrase and have all sorts of nice dynamics. And then we're going to create an arrangement from just these 4 tracks that might be like 12 tracks. So that's going to be like in about, this is the course of like three weeks work. All right? So for next week, I want you to get all of this information in here and grid it. What? Basically, should take you about 2 hours total. So and how do you work? You do 30 minutes 4 times over the next week. Or you do 45 minutes 3 times. But don't do 2 hours at once. Or you do 20 minutes a day for the next 6 days. Right? Just say, okay, today I'm going to set this up with 4 tracks. I'm going to pick just 4 instruments that are okay, nothing special. And I'm going to set up my preset tempo, slow tempo, and I'm going to put all my time signature changes in. That's it. Save that. The next day you come back, I'm going to play in the soprano line, the first 2 lines of the soprano line. Oh, one other thing too. So notice how this guy here starts on beat 2 of measure 1. Go to measure 1, beat 2. Hit 3. 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3. Right? So you start right at beat 2 to get that in. All right? So you just type that in, or you put the playback head, the cursor, right where you want to punch in. I go over that in one of the videos that I made this weekend. It's in our Dropbox folder. Okay, so I've about had it with this today. And I'm sure you guys have as well. Any questions? Everybody understands what it's supposed to do? Just get everything in and grid it to the best of your ability by next week. Yes, David.
When we're naming, do you want them soprano, alto, tenor, baritone, or do you want us to name them based on the instrument we're using?
Oh, good question. You know what? No, name it SATB. Doesn't matter because we're not going to use those instruments in the end. Kevin.
We're only, for the undergraduate, we're just doing number 17 right now.
Correct.
18.
Correct. If you want to do more, you can. But that would be a second session. Just do number 17, and you're just going to get the notes in and gridded. And yes, Elizabeth.
We have to do the whole thing?
Uh-huh.
I mean, technically I'm an undergrad.
Oh, come on. All right, if it's too much for you, then pick one of the other ones. If it's too much for you, pick one of the other ones.
No,
It won't take as long. It looks more daunting than it is if you do bit by bit. Don't try to do everything all at once. Spend a little bit of time, a few times a week, and make a goal for yourself. I'm going to finish this much today, and that's all I'm going to do. Right? And then once you get all those notes in, then you just can snap them to grid really quickly. Just do the best you can. All right? We'll see where we are next week.